Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone here at the Canon Creative Studio. It's Sundance Film Festival. Come on down. Don't be afraid to take the first row here. I promise we won't abuse you too bad. Just a little bit. Everybody's up for a little abuse. But please, come down and join us for this panel on documentaries. My name is Jay Holben. I am the technical editor for American Cinematographer Magazine. I'm an associate member of the ASC and a producer-director in LA. And it's my honor to be here and to host these panels here at the Canon Creative Studio, and especially with these two extraordinary gentlemen here, Mr. Guy Mossman and Mr. Matthew Heineman.
Thank you.
Okay, did anybody applaud for me? Oh, okay, somebody did. All right, at least there's one person out there. That's great. Thank you both for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And to kind of give you guys an introduction to these two gentlemen, we're going to show a couple of clips. Guy, I think we're going to start with a trailer of your film. And if you want to set it up a little bit for us before we take a look at it.
Okay, great. So Speak, I'm here with a film called Speak this festival this year, but unfortunately we don't have a trailer yet. So this is a trailer of a film that I co-DP'd back in 2000, that premiered here in 2020. It's a film called Feels Good Man. And a lot of animation, but we did quite a lot of some verite and interview work. And yeah, it's a fun film.
Great, let's take a look at it.
As case numbers spike around the world, the race to find a COVID-19 vaccine is gaining pace. The pandemic is burning out of control.
So I'll turn now to the director of the FDA's vaccine division.
My wife, she's teaching an art class upstairs, so hopefully you won't hear a lot. Our process must increase trust in vaccines. Without that, we're going to continue to work in places like my basement.
We've never created a new vaccine in less than 5 years.
We're going to defeat this with vaccine strategies that have never been used before.
Okay, great. That was not what we set up.
That's another film. That's a film called How to Survive a Pandemic, David France, which I shot the West Coast stuff for. But after this, go home and Google Feels Good Man. Don't worry, that's okay.
Right, absolutely. Google them both, and please go see Speak.
Okay, absolutely. If you want to know how to survive a pandemic, yeah. If you haven't figured it out yet, watch them.
Well, they're all still here.
Yeah.
So there's evidence that they kind of survived. Sorry.
Good point.
So I'm going to turn it over to you, Matthew. Hopefully we got the right thing. But what are we going to look at here?
I'm not exactly sure either. I think it's a compilation of clips from my career. So.
Okay, great. Let's try take two.
Pues, ¿qué te voy a decir? Claro que hacemos daño, lo sabemos. Toda droga que se va para allá. Pero te vuelvo a decir, somos de bajos recursos, estamos pobres. Porque si estuviéramos bien, anduviéramos como ustedes, viajando por todo el mundo, países o XA, haciendo trabajos limpios, buenos como los de ustedes. Y si nos vamos a poner a ver para que el corazoncito se nos doble, pues vamos a atar de perros, apá. Haciendo. Pues nomás la voy a hacer hasta que Dios quiera. Hasta que Dios quiera, hasta ahí vamos a dejar de hacer droga. Y cada día hacemos más y vamos a hacer más. Porque esto no se va a acabar, ¿o sí? ¿A que no, vatos? Claro que no. Ya no va a empezar lo bueno.
So obviously, Matthew, you're just starting in your career. I think you'll go places. You're doing fine. But seeing some of those clips up there from some of your work that I've seen before got me kind of emotional. The First Wave, Cartel Land, Trade. I mean, you've been through some truly extraordinary experiences in your career. And although it was the subject of yesterday's panel, it's one of the things I want to start with, which is in dealing with such incredibly heavy, traumatic, and even dangerous situations to you. How do you handle that? How do you know when to shoot and when not to shoot? And to throw more at you, just because I'm here, how do you handle it when you go home at night?
First of all, thank you for having us, and thank you all for coming. Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, we're so lucky to be able to make films and to tell stories, and it's a responsibility that I take extremely seriously. I think, obviously, I made a lot of difficult films over my career, and I think, you know, one of the hardest things is the privilege of having a blue passport and be able to come home to New York, where I live, and you know, carry these stories with you. You know, every single film that I've made has changed me, has changed how I view the world. I think if there's sort of one through line in what I've done is trying to take these huge, complicated subjects and trying to, you know, put a human face to them, trying to humanize them. But yeah, they've definitely impacted me.
There's always a question for me when I'm shooting. When do you roll and when do you not roll? When does picking up the camera violate a trust with your subject? Or when do you just roll on that incredibly intimate or heavy moment? And it's a question that I always struggle with, and I'm curious how you handle that.
I mean, for me, like, trust is the bedrock of everything that I do. And trust is not given, it's earned. And, you know, I'm often spending months and months and months and months with my subjects. And I think, you know, people talk about fly on the wall filmmaking. I sort of don't love that term because it sort of implies a lack of human connection. For me, it's about becoming part of the fabric of the lives of my subjects. Obviously, they're aware that the camera's there. Obviously, they're aware that I'm there. But I try to have as small an imprint as possible. Often it's just me alone, no sound folks, just that's where I feel most comfortable when I'm shooting. And just allowing, you know, my subjects to feel comfortable to be themselves, to be human, to be vulnerable, to be, you know, whatever's happening in that scene. Whether it's, you know, someone dying in a COVID unit or on the front lines of war in Afghanistan or, you know, any of the number of films that I made. And I think approaching, you know, you don't approach each film the same. Each subject, each person has its own sort of, ways in which you have to handle those situations.
I'm going to bring this up because it's come up as a sort of a common subject on a lot of these panels this week, and that's the fly on the wall concept. And with Clark here, who's with the Prime Minister and his director, co-DP Leon, they coined a phrase the other day, the butterfly on the wall, which I really like, right? It's a little bit different. You're welcoming it in the room. It's more inviting. It's you know, it's not the fly that you want to shoo away, right? And there's an interesting concept behind that, which I really like, but also the fly on the wall implies that you do not play a role and you do not connect with the individuals, and that's not true in any way, right? I mean, even in pure cinema verite, you are still connecting with your subjects and you're part of it. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, you know, anyone who says they're sort of making an objective film is lying, obviously. You know, anytime you change a lens, every time you move your body, anytime you press a button in the edit room, you're injecting subjectivity into the process. So yeah, I mean, I think, I don't love that term. Butterfly, I can live with a little bit more, I think, but. Yeah.
That's going to be the theme of this year's Sundance. It's going to be Butterfly on the Wall. We're going to roll with that.
Or a moth, maybe, depending on your mood.
Oh, yeah, okay, well.
I mean, you're human too, you know.
If you can get the moth attracted to the light, then that's half the battle, right? Guy, tell us a little bit about your film, Speak, that is here at the festival.
Sure. So Speak, we followed 5 kids around for about a year from around the country, and they all write speeches, and they compete. So it's a competitive documentary, but we wanted to make this a little different. We spent a lot of time with them at home. Like Matt was saying, we really embedded though, but I like to think of this idea of cinema verite as the way Joan Churchill kind of phrased it, as you're sort of trying to be a part of the inner circle, or you were there and you are, with time, earning the trust and respect and becoming a part of that inner circle. So it's, even though you kind of retreat and you might become that butterfly, you're always in the room, but you're also there. And so the voice, breaking that fourth wall, I guess, if you will, is something I appreciate and feel comfortable doing in the films I work on. This is the first film I've co-directed, that's come to Sundance. I've been here with a couple of films as a DP, and I will say, as related to the topic of when to turn on and when to turn off the camera, I do find that I can be pulled into a scene emotionally, really focused on what's happening in the scene. I respect Matt and his ability to kind of keep a sort of meta perspective of what's happening as a director. At the same time, I find that I need another producer or someone around to kind of keep eyes open for what I'm not seeing necessarily. And especially with minors, shooting with kids, I found that was really important and helpful in terms of respecting boundaries, things like that.
Yeah, Matthew, what you said reminds me of something that Albert Maysles said a long time ago, which is, in cinema verite, you cannot have a completely objective. Just the mere fact that you decide where to put the camera, when to hit start and when to hit stop, puts a subjectivity on it. And I think that changed my view of docs, which I used to think had to be completely objective. You can't put a viewpoint on it. But truthfully, we do. We put our viewpoint as filmmakers onto everything that we do, even if we're trying to show 2 sides or more of a particular issue. Do you ever find that you're struggling with trying to be neutral, or do you lean into your perspective on a particular story?
Again, anyone who says they're neutral, I think, is full of shit. But I just try to make human films. I try to make films that I think, one of my amazing editors is here. Like when I'm in the edit room, my North Star is, there's a feeling in a room. There's a feeling in this room. Like, you might be cold. You might be thinking about you drank too much last night. You might be thinking about the film you just saw, and there's air in here. There's the smell. Like, my goal is in the edit room to take audiences and make you feel like you're in middle of a desert cooking meth in a hospital room. Like, what does that feel like? It has a feeling, and if we're remotely taking an audience there, then we're succeeding, and that's sort of my North Star. About the sort of on and off, turning the camera on and off, I was just sort of ruminating about my different films, and there's a scene in this film I made called City of Ghosts. At the end of the film, it's about a group of activists from Raqqa, Syria, the capital of the Islamic State, who were exposing what the atrocities that ISIS was doing, and ISIS started to kill them one by one. And so the film is sort of this exodus as they're trying to escape, first to Turkey and then to Europe. And I filmed them for many, many, many months. And the film kept morphing and changing and evolving into many different things. But there's this sort of trauma that I felt all the time. But the guys are so stoic. I couldn't sort of break through and get any moments that I felt sort of showed that. And so for months and months and months, I thought I had like 3/4 of a film, but I never had the sort of like the heart of this film. And I think about a year into the film, I was in Berlin, where one of the main characters had eventually found himself, and ISIS in Berlin had issued a death threat to him and said they were going to come and find him and kill him. And so that morning, I filmed him going to the sort of German FBI. He was very rattled, and he came back to his apartment, he and I, and he started looking at photos of all of his friends who had been killed. And he started to shake, and he started to have this sort of panic attack on camera. He was smoking, and his hand was rattling, and it was, you saw a clip of it in the reel. And obviously, like, every human instinct in me was, give this guy a hug. We had grown quite close at this point. But, my job as a filmmaker was to capture this moment. And obviously, he felt comfortable with me being there. We'd spent so much time together. So I literally rolled, I think it was like I rolled the entire card. I think I rolled for 90 minutes straight without cutting. He eventually like passed out and then woke up. And, after all that happened, I put the camera down, I gave him a huge hug. We went out and grabbed dinner like 2 a.m, stayed up and talked for like 5 hours. But like, my job in that moment was to capture it.
Yeah, that's the fine balance there, right? Between being a human and being a filmmaker. And I thank you for that story. I love that because you found that balance. You got the moment that you needed to, and you still were a human to that.
And the last thing I'll say is that, that's the sort of beauty of this form. And especially as, budgets are shrinking and news is becoming more and more, whatever, we all know what news is becoming. I think documentaries filling this very, 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 very important void in sort of long-form investigative storytelling. And, that scene never would have happened if I sort of knocked on his door and said, can I interview you about, ISIS? That was born out of months and months and months of relationship building.
Guy brought up an interesting kind of idea that when you're operating, when you're the cinematographer, you can get myopic, right? You can get myopic in what you're seeing. How do you have that third eye? How do you stay aware of everything around you when you don't have somebody with you? Yeah.
I don't know, instincts. I didn't go to film school. I've no formal training. I think I still have imposter syndrome like everyone does. I've sort of, I think there's obviously I miss stuff, and it's just a different way of operating in a verite situation. But I'm constantly like, I'm shooting, but I'm obviously always looking around, trying to make sure that I'm not missing things. But of course, you miss things. But that's just the nature of shooting verite.
I think like part of being human and being behind the camera is that you are occasionally going to maybe cross the line with somebody, but if you've earned that and you've established a relationship, they will tell you, they'll let you know, and I had a situation in this project. I think it was a learning moment for me as I'm sort of refining my instincts and cutting my teeth as a director and shooter. I had asked the subject. It was I don't know if anyone's seen the film, but we have a subject. One of our subjects, Noor, her brother is very sick, and she's writing her speech about being a caregiver and sort of ableism and so that his story, the brother's story, is very important. He has a progressive disease called Lennox-Gastaut, and he was going to the hospital, and it was an emergency. We were there filming with them at a competition, and my instincts were, we've got to go, and can we do this with you? And I asked his mom that, and that moment when I asked her, she was still grieving, and she was really worried. She wasn't grieving, but she was really worried about what was happening to him. And it was just the wrong moment. And she kind of shut down the shoot that day. And she didn't call us back for a couple of days. So it was like a huge, even though we had established a relationship, we've been shooting with her for like 4 or 5 months. In this situation, she felt it was inappropriate. And yeah, that was a learning moment for me. Not sure if I could have gone back and, I think I would have probably like just, because it was during the competition itself. So instinctually, I was still in that cinematographer mode, I guess, and I was thinking about story and how it could work, but I misread the situation with her. And so, yeah, she was like, she ghosted us for a couple of days.
But
we of course we made up and everything's fine. So and that happens, right? Like everything ends on a positive note. We continue to shoot, but like the point is that I didn't get that scene, but it didn't matter in the end because we found other ways to tell the story. So,
did you address that moment and that topic later? Did she allow you to talk about it and whatever?
Absolutely.
That was?
Yeah. Absolutely. I called her and, just we talked through it a little bit, but, it's just, she was very sensitive in that moment. She's very worried about her son. And I felt it was like really critical to show this moment as a verite cinematographer as well. And, but I have shot a lot of verite over the years and never has this happened to me. And I think maybe what it is speaking to is sort of an increase in sort of media consciousness, or at least, she was very conscious of how she might be reflected on camera or be portrayed on camera in this state. And it was very vulnerable. She wasn't ready to go there. But with time, we worked through it. We didn't get that type of scene, but we have other great scenes. So.
I was just thinking of similar scenes that I either didn't shoot or put the camera down, and I made this film called Cartelland that was actually here 10 years ago, which makes me feel very old. And that scene that opened the clip reel in the meth lab was something that from the moment I landed in Mexico, I was trying to get that scene. Meth was the lifeblood of the cartel. Meth was what caused all the violence that I was depicting and showing. Meth was what caused all the human suffering for the civilians of Michoacan. And so literally every day, every shoot, I would ask people, do you know someone who cooks meth? Asking various ways to get into a meth lab. And often I'd get teased and it would almost happen and then it wouldn't happen. And about 10 months in, I got a call saying, be in this town square at 5 p.m. and you're in, from someone I'd been filming with. And so as our car had just broken down and I was like, fuck, we're never gonna make it. We got our car to work. We drove to this town square. This sort of group of masked men drove us to these villages, and then the villages were sort of getting smaller and smaller, and then we got into the desert. And we got into this field, and this other car drove up and said, what are you doing here? And we said, I think you know what we're doing here. I said, no. And he said, follow us. And so we drove to this nearby, sort of bar in this tiny, tiny, tiny little village. And it was one of the most cinematic scenes that I'd experienced down there. Is all these cartel members playing pool and smoking, and it was sort of it was this scene that you can only imagine in a movie. And every single instinct in my body was saying, bring out the camera and film this. But I'd worked so hard to get the scene that you see there. I at first was just keep the camera down, be patient, you're here for a reason. And then I started talking to this guy, and he started explaining all the things that I'd sort of thought was happening in Michoacan, of the connection between the auto defenses that I was filming with and the government and the people cooking meth. And he sort of was laying out everything that sort of the film, that it's been sort of hidden from me, and just so clearly stating everything that I've been seeking. And again, I was like, fuck, I need to be filming this. But I didn't. And so eventually we sort of sat there, and I developed a lot of relationships with people there. We eventually got in to film the scene that you saw. But I went home to New York feeling like I just failed as a journalist because I didn't get this moment that was so important to understand everything. And the next shoot that I went down, I saw that guy at a checkpoint, and I said, "Would you be willing to go on camera and talk to me?" And he was. And for whoever's seen the movie, he's the one in the end wearing the government shirt who had been cooking meth, wearing the Autodefensa hat, and just put it all together. But it was sort of a exercise in restraint that taught me a lot at an early age.
Because the subject sees that you're capable of respecting where they're at in that moment, and so that's part of earning their trust, right? I screwed it up.
But thank you for sharing it, because it's an important lesson in that delicate balance of trust, right? That's like you said, that's what it's all about. It's a trust with your subject. Yeah. And even the fact that you respected that and didn't hound her afterwards is an important lesson.
I love her. She's amazing. But yeah, it was just someone else needed to be like, now's not the moment. And I lost that perspective in that moment.
How the hell do I segue from this into what cameras did you use? It's been an extraordinary discussion right now, but I do want to touch a little bit on what you guys use as tool sets and what you sort of lean towards, whether it's Canon or not, to help you tell these stories. Let's talk about some of the hardware that you bring in, Guy.
Sure. Yeah. Typically, I'll shoot with. It just depends on the director, really, in the project, but typical Verite setup will be like a C500 or C300. I haven't tried the C400 yet, and 24-70, and a 70-200. That's like a very, good base kit. On this film, I did things a little differently. On this film, because I developed it and produced it, directed it, I did something I always wanted to do. I shot a film anamorphic, and I partnered with Atlas Lens Company, and we shot with their line of lenses, primes. And we shot the classroom material, which we were very restricted in the classrooms. We couldn't move. So I used zooms and spherical zooms for those. So we used the Cineservo 25-250, which is a Canon lens. It's a great lens, and it's not a Verite lens, but it gives you a lot more range. And because we were shooting large format, this is a nice little trick. If you click it into the 1.5 time extender, it will not vignette on a large format, and you've got a 26 to 3. Whatever it is.
It's like a 37 to
375. So, and that was really important because we had a lot of distance to cover with these zooms. So, but yeah, no, this documentary was all primes, in terms 90% of it in anamorphic. But I like to keep the package relatively small. And again, it really depends on your director. And Matt has his way of working, which is, very compact as well. But in this case, we had a producer, we had a director, co-director with me, and then we were streaming, we had a Ronin on hand, and lots of bells and whistles. So yeah, this was a very different type documentary for me.
Were they the Mercuries or the Orions?
They were the Mercuries, yeah. Which is really what I like, because I'm shooting. These were cameras that were 16:9 sensor aspect. So you want to use if you use a 2-time squeeze lens, you're going to end up chopping off a lot of the image. So if you're using a 1.5 squeeze, you're only chopping off about 10% in post. But I love these lenses. These are great. But yeah, that's for maybe another panel.
It's really hard for me not to go down a lens rabbit hole, but I'm going to let you sit there. Matt, do you have a particular favorite kind of gear or something you return to?
I love how nerdy we're getting. This is great. I'm a really simple. A lot of people rig out their cameras with big, shoulder pieces and other things. I just use, as of late, the C500 Mark II body. Obviously, sound is more important than visuals in a doc, and so I have a really nice Sheps mic on my camera. And I've been using these new Wizzycom lavs, which you can have two lavs into one channel, which is really nice. So I'm recording 4 channels of audio and mixing myself as I'm shooting. And so, but that allows you to get into these rooms and also get really good audio. I generally only shoot on 2 lenses. In the full frame world of the Mark II, I shoot on same thing, 24-70, 70-200. And that's also key in shooting. For me, it's key in shooting verite. I don't fully. I have no like shade against it, but I don't fully understand how you shoot verite on a prime, unless it's sort of. To me, it makes it feel a little bit more staged because you're constantly having to like get in the your subject's faces and or just be really far back.
You're in situations, I think, or I was in situations that were more controlled.
Right.
And I think you're finding yourself in situations where shooting on primes would be crazy. Yeah.
Right.
You're right. A lot less controllable.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good differentiation of the two styles.
It's
again,
like the classroom for us, right? Like we had to be reactive, really, and be able to pull back when we needed to.
Yeah.
The zooms are important.
So yeah, that's what I do.
Okay, got that out of the way. Check that box.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit on a broader scale about what you think the state of documentaries are right now. I know that so much of it's being pushed to streamers, but there's a little bit of grumbling about too much commercialism or too much of a formula into docs. But you also, Matt, brought up a great point that this is probably one of our best sources of honest news, right, is in documentaries as opposed to the commercialized 24/7 news networks. So without me getting on a soapbox here, do you have any thoughts on where we are in the current state of documentaries and what might be picked up here or where we're headed?
Yeah, and one last thing about the nerdy stuff. I think, given that there's a lot of filmmakers in here, I just want to also state these are all tools, and it's about how you use the tools. And that's, I think when I was younger, I was like, what's the cool camera? What's the cool lens? And as I've become an old man, I rely less and less on sort of what is it's all about how you use these tools. And I probably shouldn't say this as someone who's been supported by Canon for a while, but I've been enjoying just shooting my iPhone for certain things that just like, if I'm on a stage with somebody, a musician, just shooting on an iPhone and seeing how far I can push what an iPhone can look like. So it's fun to sort of, Yeah,
absolutely. It's not the tools, it's the filmmaker, right? And there's no bad camera, and there's no bad lens. So anything that you can use to tell the story that you have, I think is absolutely phenomenal, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't answer your question.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm going to toss it back at you. Basically, where the hell are we in docs and what's going on?
Complicated question. I mean, I think there's it feels like there's definitely a contraction happening in the industry. I think exec producers are more risk averse. So you're not going to see the range of filmmaking on commercial television, and that's very unfortunate. So we're in a time of transition. I know from experience, a little bit of experience, pitching this project over and over for the early in 2021 and 22. You worked with Jigsaw. I partnered with Jigsaw to develop this project, and we pitched everyone it as a series. And I learned so much during that process, and I had never done that. And the kinds of questions that we were being asked about, the outcome and how can you know if someone is winning or losing in the middle of a competition? These are things that are going through the minds of the commissioning editors. And it's kind of unfortunate because it's sort of missing the point, at least in the case of our project. So it's very reductive. And it's not because people are not smart, it's just because taking chances is riskier.
I agree verbatim of everything you said. I think the one I was just thinking about, I feel like I was in this chair 2 years ago on a panel here, and for me, as someone who loves verite, who's made mostly only verite films, it just gotten harder and harder and harder to get them funded. You know, when you walk up into a streamer, an executive, I hope no one's here, but you know, I often walk in and say, look, I have this amazing story, I have this amazing subject, I have this amazing world that we're about to immerse in. I have no fucking clue, I have no clue what the second act is, what the third act is. I can guarantee you that we're swimming in a petri dish where something really beautiful is gonna grow, but I cannot tell you what that's gonna grow into. And that is a terrifying thing for an executive to hear. And even American Symphony, you know, I couldn't get anyone to fund that movie. And for me, that was like the most fundable movie I'd made. And it wasn't until it premiered at Sundance, Telluride, that the film sold. So I just think it's really sad that sort of investigative, complicated, character-driven verite films, I think we're going to see less and less and less of, and we're going to see more and more and more of, you know, true crime, celebrity stuff, and that's just where we are. And I think it's the same thing in the fiction world where we're seeing more, you know, IP-driven stuff. I think every musician, every celebrity is getting their doc treatment these days, and some of them are really beautiful and important films. But I just think that's where we are.
I want to make sure that all of you have a chance to ask any questions that you have of these two panelists up here, and we got a few minutes left, so let's just don't be shy. Okay, I've got somebody in the back row. Excellent, wonderful. We're going to bring a mic to you so that the peeps at home can hear you.
Hello. Well, hey.
Hey.
I'm Joshua. I work for Cream Source, but I've got a non-technical question because I think that's going to move. I was just thinking about, you were just talking about how it's trouble finding funding in general. I know it's always been hard for docs, but I was just kind of curious, like more personal would be, have you ever felt like you lost a film? Like you've ever missed a chance? Or as you were saying earlier, sometimes you have those intimate moments or risky moments and you just feel like you've lost the film because you can't shoot it? That's my question.
Yeah. Like while making it, that I've lost it. Yeah. I made a film called Retrograde with Caitlin and Grace here, and it was about the final months of the war in Afghanistan. And in August of 2021, we were flying back to Afghanistan to film what we thought would be sort of one of the final battles between the Afghan general that we were following and the Taliban. And we landed in Dubai to connect to Kabul, and our plane started to descend into the valley. And as we got lower and lower and lower, our phone started ping, 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 ping. And we got these news alerts that the Taliban had taken over Kabul, and that there's a plane, and the pilot got on the intercom and said that there's a plane on the tarmac and we can't land. And so we kept circling and circling and circling, and eventually we're running out of gas. The pilot was very scared, and we flew back to Dubai. And I just thought it was the greatest journalistic failure in my entire career. We had built this story for months and months and months to this horrible, tragic end. Our main subject was on the ground there, and I was sitting there in a stupid hotel room watching it play out on TV. And I just thought it was literally the greatest failure of my whole career. And as my dad told me as a young kid, you know, with every door that closes, a door opens. And spent every waking hour after that trying to figure out how to get back into the country. which we did 4 or 5 days later. And what it allowed was General Sadat, who had been following, had already left the country, but allowed me and my my other DP that was with Tim Grushka to capture the human tragedy of what was happening at the airport. And that never would have happened if I'd gotten on an airplane. And it just opened up a whole sort of different side of the story that humanized the sort of greater tragedy of Afghanistan and the Taliban takeover. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's one of many, many sort of failures that have turned into opportunities. And I think it's really important, as I've gotten older, it's recognizing what that failure is and being patient to see what that opportunity might be.
Guy, do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Well, I'm going to tie it to the film Speak, because I thought this project had hit a wall, and I had spent 2 years working on it and developing it. This was during COVID, 20 and 21, and it was really well put, Matt. I mean, you just feel like a complete failure. We had pitched all these different people. We had developed it, though finally we'd found a partner that was ideal for it. And after 4 months of developing it with them, they pulled the plug. It was a classic situation. And there were a lot of people within the organization or within the company that had worked on it. And it was at the top that they decided not to greenlight it. We weren't the only one, as it turned out, and that organization changed radically in the news soon after it became clear. But so for almost a year, I sort of languished trying to figure out what my next moves were. But because that happened, I pivoted a year later, kind of picked up the pieces, picked myself up off the floor, and as a result, I think we have a far superior film now that's here. And it's a film, not a series. And it was definitely, I'm glad it's a film, not a series. And I have a co-directing partner, Jen Teixeira, who's amazing, who I wouldn't have been able to work with. So yeah, it was a blessing. It was a total blessing. So, you know that you just can't give up, and you reflect back and you look at how you can resurrect something that's seemingly put back on the back burner. You think it's over, but you just got to be determined, and so yeah.
Not that it's about me, and I know that it's not, but I can relate very deeply to your question. I spent a decade on a documentary that during the middle of making it, the environment around the subjects changed. So it went from a contemporary story to a historical piece. Technology changed drastically. We ran out of money. And after 10 years on a particular project, the producing partner and myself had to make a very painful decision to abandon it and let it all go. And it still scars me, but there were so many things that were fighting against us that the whole thing just kind of fell apart. And yeah, there's my PTSD to add to this particular. I've got time for probably one more. Yes, please. If we can hand the microphone over to the gentleman in the Sundance Film Festival hoodie.
Hi, I'm Axel Coney. I'm a student filmmaker. I love what y'all said about the state of documentaries. And I was wondering, as young people that are getting into the industry, what do y'all think we can do to fight what y'all said about documentaries and verite films being less funded?
You want to take up a collection right now? We can do a GoFundMe. No, sorry.
I think make the film while you're young. As soon as you take a risk, take chances. Now's the time in your life, and shoot it on an iPhone if you have to. But shoot the film. You have to follow your heart. Really, your heart has to be in the film. Otherwise, your subjects aren't going to trust you, and they're going to question your motivation. So I think though it seems daunting and funding prospects are less certain, there are more and more ways to make films economically. And in a lot of ways, getting on Adobe or Resolve, you can be so creative, and you don't need to invest an arm and a leg in post either.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most cliched answer of all, but just make stuff. Whenever I talk to students, or as technology has been democratized, and as we all carry movie making things in our pockets, just go out and tell stories that are important to you, tell stories that move you, tell stories that you have unique access to. And I think obviously we've seen as well, the different forms that content has changed culture. Citizen journalists filming something, and it's changing, our world. So I think, we have a lot of power, for better, for worse, in image making, in telling stories. And I think, sorry to say this again, but I just, as truth becomes more and more malleable, and as AI becomes more ubiquitous, I really, truly believe that documentary will help find a path for us to see what our world is really like. So it's on you to keep telling important stories, and yeah.
I know I can speak for everybody in the room here that we look forward to the stories that you two are going to tell in the future. And thank you very much for being here and for sharing. It's been a great experience for me. And thank you all for being here. And on behalf of American Cinematographer and Canon, we appreciate you all being here. And enjoy the rest of your festival. Thank you.
Been fun. Thank you.
Thank you.